Yeah, to hold up the meeting to do that. Mr. Hilton is going to start. Just call the meeting over and go into presentations because it'll take some time. Get here before we do any actual business. Thanks for your patience, everybody. We want to welcome you to the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency monthly meeting. It's November 14th. It's a little bit after 6 o'clock. And again, welcome. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Porter?
Here.
Commissioner Doty?
Here.
Commissioner Warwick? Here. Commissioner Moore will be arriving shortly.
He will be arriving shortly. He's on his way. As is our custom, are there any conflicts of interest with anything on the agenda this evening among the commissioners? Seeing none, we're going to go right into our presentations, and we have Ms. Rossi here with the Wolffield update. Wolffield.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to present and talk about the hopefully next phase of the Wolffield and what the college is looking to do, and hopefully work with Urban Renewal in the city in continuing to further that great facility. Thanks, please. So the Christensen-Buffington hitting facility. So Carl Christensen and, I'll wait for Dave. I did. And Dean Buffington, both alumni of the college, both their widows have committed a substantial amount to this facility and would like to do something in their husband's name. As most of you know, I'm not sure if you're as familiar with Dean, but Carl Christensen was a staple in this community for a long time and always so focused on our youth and the success. Yeah, when I first moved here, the opportunity to get to talk with Carl, and even when he was diagnosed with cancer, I called him about something and wanted to make sure he was doing okay, and he took that opportunity to lecture me on what I should be investing in. So those of you who know Carl, that sounds about par for the course. But the ability to do something in both these gentlemen's honor would be something special for the college and also probably for the community. So here's the initial layout. I apologize that these aren't bigger, but as we looked at this, this is not the exact. I did print out copies for you. So what we're looking to do so that would be 3 hitting lanes. And that particular drawing is, I wanna say it's 75 by 50. And I'll just jump right to the numbers. So we're looking to increase the size of that slightly. The ideal size would be a 60 by 100, so a 6,000 square foot facility. In talking with a couple of our contractors, we would be looking to start this after the spuds conclude their season, so a late August start. And then, he thought I would be safe between 130 and 150 per square foot at that point in time, based on the current trends. But as you and I both know, who knows where building costs will be at that point in time. If we were to do the 6,000 square foot facility, obviously that depends on a couple things on our side as well. The vote tomorrow night with City Council and how they end with the fire suppression system. If that's intact, then we would be looking to build smaller than the 5,000 square feet. If it was removed, then we would look for the 6,000 square foot facility, allowing us 3 cages, 70 foot each, gives us a little bit of walking room in between and some walking room on the ends. The bonus would be of that size of facility would be the storage. Right now, we store most of our equipment in the dugout through the winter. So to get that in and out of the elements would provide a little bit of longevity. The alternate size, again, would be 60 by 83, and then bring that cost down substantially. Still allowing us the 3 cages, still allowing, you want to have the 5 feet in between both hitting the sides in the middle for safety, as people are going to walk in between that, but that'll stop a ball from, potentially hitting somebody there. And it would also allow us that size of facility to pull all the nets up and kind of use it for a little bit of infield practice. Those of you who know Coach Humberger, at the end of the day, he would just take anything that's got, he doesn't need anything fancy, he doesn't need the frills, he would love the storage, but at the end of the day, he just wants somewhere to hit inside. Now, how this impacts the community, immediately for the college, it would suffice for both of our baseball and our softball. But I can see, working with Denise back here, as we work a lot on Wolf Field, the ability to use that for some of the youth of the community. Now that baseball is a year-round thing, softball is a year-round thing, not that I necessarily agree with that, but kind of the trend of youth sports these days. But it would provide some opportunity to rent that facility out, use it for some of our youth. And then also the Canaan County Spuds. We haven't talked with the Spuds much about this project and if there's a financial commitment from them, but that's somebody we would also potentially approach as well. Any questions yet?
Any questions from the commission? You're good.
And then finally, just quickly on the funding sources. The college currently has $400,000 raised towards this project. We would be looking for about $150 in in-kind donation for the steel portion of the facility, which is not out of the realm for a couple of our donors that have worked with us with stuff in the past. And then potentially an ask of urban renewal for $250,000. Again, kind of depends on, as I talk with you, Jim, a lot of moving parts, kind of putting the cart before the horse on some things. But we feel like this could get us over the top, and then we would, again, look to start as soon as the Spuds conclude their season. So, any questions, anything I can offer up?
Questions? Anything, Dave? Oh, no. Okay. Great. We have no questions.
Okay,
Great
very
presentation.
good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate all of you and your commitment and to the work for our community. Thanks.
Then this will come back to us as an action item or an item to consider next month as we finish our work. Brings us to a presentation by the Caldwell Housing Authority in regard to the Rice House relocation. Mike?
Just waiting for the PowerPoint to come up there. So my name is Mike Dittenber. I'm the director of the Housing Authority for the City of Caldwell. I've been doing this now going on my 17th year for the City of Caldwell, and every once in a while I get the opportunity to speak before the governing body of the City of Caldwell. I think this is probably maybe the second or the third time I've had a chance to address you, and I'm hoping we can have a very good discussion around this John C. Rice house. So just a really brief history, thanks to people like Chuck Randolph, Jan Bowles. John C. Rice was one of the first Supreme Court justices of the state of Idaho, and he resided in Caldwell, and he built this thing called the Rice House. And those of you who know where it sits, this is what it looks like today. It's boarded up. It's been in that location since 1983. So Mr. Rice built the house. As legend has it, his wife was one of the nosiest people in town, so she wanted that turret built so she can look up and down the street to make sure she knew what all the neighbors were doing. He then sold the house to a gentleman who, if I'm not mistaken, ended up working for the Department of Interior doing mapping, surveying, and ended up giving the house to the church that now sits on the corner of 16th and Cleveland. And so anyway, so I've been looking at this house for a long time. The Crowleys bought the house in 1981. They moved it around the corner in 1983. And again, legend has it, the city went to great efforts to cut every tree down in the pathway to make sure that the house got to that location. And since then, it's been sitting there, decaying, rotting. So one of the things that the Housing Authority does is investigate those conditions that lead to slum. I also add in the blight, because slum and blight go hand in hand, and this is definitely a blighted area of our city. College of Idaho has a beautiful campus. They're doing beautiful things, but I think this is just something that's kind of like a wart in the side of their forehead or something. I don't know. It's just there. And so we've been working with the college for a long time to see if we can't move this Rice House to another location. So I always like to talk about Idaho Code Title 50, Section 19, and I always point out that urban renewal law is Idaho Code Title 50, Section 20, so they are an inferior code to the Housing Authority Code. But as you see in our title, the powers of the authority, a housing authority shall constitute an independent public body, corporate and politic, exercising public and essential government functions, and having all the powers necessary and convenient to carry out and effectuate the purposes and provisions of this act, including the following granted herein. And then Section A says something, and B and C, and they all say something, right? I reserve the right to pick and choose which part of the title, best benefits me. But if you go all the way down to Section F, it says, within its area of operation, to investigate into living, dwelling, housing conditions, and to the means and methods improving such conditions, to determine where slum and blight exist, or where there is a shortage of adequate, safe, sanitary dwelling and accommodation for persons of low income, and to make studies and recommendations. For those of you who have a chance to meet with me from time to time, know that I'm always studying, and I'm always making recommendations relating to the problems of clearing, planning, reconstruction of slum areas, and the problems of providing dwelling accommodations for persons of low income, and to cooperate with the city and the county and the state and the political subdivision thereof, and actions taken in connection with each of these problems. And then it finishes up by saying something. So this is what the Rice House looked like in its grand days. And you can see the church off to the west side of it there, whatever side that is, since Caldwell sits at an angle at the parallel. But this is what it looked like, and if you remember the other picture, it's all boarded up. So my goal would be to relocate this house, and to relocate it to an area where we can put the time and the attention necessary to bring it back to its old glory. And in the process of doing so, make housing available. Make housing available for those people who are having a hard time finding housing, and specifically those in the public safety arena. We know that law enforcement officers, firefighters, many of them that might be single or unaccompanied or living individually may have a hard time to find a place to live in this market. However, I'm not so sure that this is the place for them, and so just bear with me while I try to close a window I opened. So this is the look of the house from the side, and it's covered by overgrown trees. And just so everybody is aware of what's going to take place, is the Housing Authority has agreed to clear the lot for the college, and we're working on an MOU. We're gonna clear the lot. We're gonna remove the old house that, sits to the north of it. We're gonna tear it down, and we're gonna make the property pretty much shovel-ready, with the exception of the rice house, in which we'll have to do some, major work to the landscape itself, including filling in a full-size basement so that we can, get wheels under the house to move it off the property. Moving the house off the property is gonna take some heavy lifting. We just don't know how we're gonna get it to the location that we wanna take it to. I've had a brief conversation with the mayor, and he thinks that there's plenty of, routes to get it to where we need to. But we're gonna need to, investigate those clearly. One of the things, when I talked about, moving this house back in 1990, I'd talked with, the moving company, Pacific Movers, and they had said they need at least 3 hours to cross the railroad, either at, Fifth or at 21st. And, they said that in the past, they've had a hard time negotiating with moving anything across a railroad track. But they said Mr. McDonald was the perfect person to be able to solve that problem for us. So he did have a solution. So anyway, so the Caldwell Housing Authority, owns a piece of property on the corner of Kimball and Chicago. And, I tell everybody this because it's true. The Housing Authority has the opportunity under the law to legally launder property. And what that means is the county will take a piece of property by tax deed, and then they transfer it to the Caldwell Housing Authority. And so then at that point, we have conflicting laws, right? So Idaho code says when a property is taken by tax deed by the county and it's transferred to somebody, liens of record go away, except that title companies don't buy that. So title companies say, well, I don't care what the state says. We still think that somebody may have interest in that property who could come back and sue at any time. So the property is still a scarred title. So what we have to do is we have to negotiate liens away. This particular piece of property had $554,000 worth of liens against it from the previous owner. The previous owner not only failed to pay taxes for a 7-year period, but also failed to keep his workers' comp insurance current when there was a major accident on his work site, hospitalizing several people. So we have had this property since November of 2016, and slowly we've chipped away. And so we're now at the last phases of getting this property a clean title. Not only did we have to have lien releases from everybody, and we negotiated them away, but we also got to go to court through what's called a quiet title process. We basically have to sue everybody who's ever had any interest in the property since the first liens were filed against it, and they have to say in court what their interest in the property is. We don't think that that'll happen because we've secured release of interest. So that's where we would like to move the rice house. This is 4/10 of an acre. It would be a great place for the house. Now, when we start talking about, putting the house in this location, there would be adequate parking. Whatever the house ended up being, whether or not, down the road you go, oh, you know what, this would be a great restaurant or a good office space or a law office or whatever the case may be, there's adequate room on this property to put the rice house there. So here's the angle from the other side. This is our, if you want to come out there and grab anything on that pile, it's all goat head. So just so you know, we pile our goat head high. We grow it pretty thick on that property. So anyway, here's the property from an aerial view. I'm not fortunate enough to have all the fancy aerial stuff like the city has, so I just go straight to Google Maps, and I put a little red circle up there. That's what burned last week or a couple weeks ago. So interesting point about this here is I think that there are 7 properties on the National Registry of Historic Places. One of them is the Rice House, and one of them is that house that caught on fire. And the others are, I think there's 4 more on the college, and then there's a couple other around town. I think the other one is the house that the R&M Steel guy owns over there on Albany, I think around the corner there. So we would literally have 3 of the 7 houses on the National Registry of Historic Places within a small area of each other. Now, it's outside of the historic district. It was originally in the historic district, and, you know, ideally, all things perfect, it probably should be back in the historic district. Except, I want the Rice House, and I want it on the property in, Kimball and Chicago. So, we also own this property right around the corner on Albany. And so, that's the, a church there on the corner. It's a three-story building, and I talk about this property because it's important to the overall discussion about moving the Rice House. And bear with me, and I'll see if I can't connect all the dots. But this is the type of apartment that we want to put there on that Albany. Not that wide, because the lot's not that wide. It's only a 100-foot wide lot. So we're looking at putting something which would be about two of those kind of, which would be, a sixplex, with some off-street parking, probably not underneath, but something in that area, in that lot on Albany. That's a traditionally zoned area. So 0 setbacks on the side, 15 on the front, 10 on the back. We also have some area outlined for parking. But anyway, we've got a full set of workups, and I was looking for the plans on one of my mini thumb drives on my highly organized stack of stuff on my desk, and just decided to put this one in there in a pinch. But so here's the big question, right? You see my graphics. I worked hard on those. So how do we move this thing? How do we get it downtown? I think there's a number of companies. One of them is Pacific Movers, whose father and grandfather originally moved this house, and the actual guy who owns Pacific Movers now is a graduate of two different colleges, the Albertsons College of Idaho and the College of Idaho. And so he said that he was the first group. He didn't want the Albertsons College title, so they had another ceremony and gave College of Idaho. So at any rate, we think we know how to do it. We think we can work out a path. It's just going to cost a lot of money. So back in 2016, many of you may know that that our current mayor, Mayor Wagner, had looked at purchasing the house from the college and moving it out to his place that he has now. And back then it was about $45,000 to move the house. And how do I know this? Because he called me and the housing authority to do an assessment on whether or not the place could be moved. And I think he decided to go a different route. In 2019, when I reapproached the college about moving the house, the gentleman who came out and looked at the house said it's probably going to cost you around $65,000 to $70,000 to move the house. So today, I estimate, based upon the percentage increase between 16, 19, and 2023, it's probably going to be an estimated $100,000 to move the house. So I don't know that. This is just our initial discussion. We haven't had any formal quotes on it, but I just wanted to start with the number somewhere. So let's talk about Title 50, Section 20, Urban Renewal Law. The powers of the Urban Renewal Agency shall have all powers necessary and convenient to carry out and effectuate the purposes of the provision of this act, including the following: something, B, to provide or arrange or contract for the furnishing, repair of any person or agency, public or private, services, privileges, work, streets, roads, public utilities, or other facilities in connection with urban renewal projects to install, construct, reconstruct streets, utilities, parks, playgrounds, off-street parking facilities, public facilities and stuff. And then it says a bunch of other stuff. And I told you I reserve the right to pick and choose which code I like the best. So right here under 207J, it says, in addition to the powers under subsection B of this section, an agency may construct foundations, platforms, and other like structures necessary for the provision or utilization of air rights sites for buildings and to be used for residential, commercial, industrial, and other uses by urban renewal law. So what is an air right? An air right, according to the ICC, is a property interest or a space above the Earth's surface. So anything that the Urban Renewal District thinks that they want to preserve as far as an air right, they can build a foundation, a platform, or other like structures. So I don't think that I could realistically come to the Urban Renewal Agency and say, give me $100,000 to move a house. or $150,000. But what I think I can do is I can come to the urban renewal agency and ask for foundations. So I'm thinking of $170,000, you know. I wanted to start high with $1 million and have it, you know, work down to, you know, where I really needed it, but I'm thinking about $170,000 from URD for infrastructure according to 5207B and for foundations according to 5207J. In exchange, there would be an assurance from CHA that 6 units will be available at or below the fair market rent for public safety personnel as a priority for housing. And then, of course, there would be an inferior position deed restriction, not for less than 20 years. And so that inferior position deed restriction just says, listen, we're going to deed restrict the property for public safety personnel, but we also got to note that the bank is going to come in first position, and they may have a deed requirement of first position. Doesn't have anything to do with our management offering it as a priority or offering it at a discounted rent. So at today's interest rate, $170,000 contribution to either of these at Kenmore, Chicago, or Albany would necessarily, in real dollar cost, be about a $200 a month reduction in rent should it be financed. So $170,000 is roughly 10% of the construction cost of a new building out the Albany project. Just like that, I'm done. So anyway, you know, just to kind of to finish up, Caldwell's got a lot of history. This is a historical place. It's an historical building. It would be nice to take it from the college, move it to a place where we can get some utility out of it. And, you know, the Housing Authority has worked long and hard over the years to collect properties, to clean up the title, to put those properties in position to be able to do something with. This would just be a nice addition to the downtown area. It would put a historic house in relation to 2 of the other 7 historic houses in the city. And, you know, the nice thing about bringing this house down there is if we don't bring the house down there, we have no options. But bringing the house down there in conjunction with our other planned development opens the door for a whole bunch of options where the Housing Authority can serve the city. So now I think I'm done.
Mike, I don't think you are ever done. Appreciate everything that you've had to say. There, that's better. Questions for Mr. Mike?
No question, Mr. Chair, just a comment. So,
Mr. Doty.
and Mike and I have talked before, but I don't know how we'll go for you in the future about this house, but I'm certainly in support of helping you out in any way that we think is reasonably possible to do so. So, especially with the public safety factor.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Who's going to occupy the house? Who's qualified to occupy the house? Is it going to be I'm sorry.
So as the proposal would go forward or in its inception right now is we would move the house down there to provide a housing preference, both preference and presence of public safety people, public safety personnel. Now, between the Rice House, which could possibly accommodate 8 rooms, and the other development on Albany, which would be a 6-plex, we're possibly putting 14 units of housing downtown.
What's the public safety person?
So public safety personnel would be anybody who is currently employed by the police department or the fire department. Okay.
No, that's fine, Dave. Thanks.
So this would be branded, and who would maintain, who's going to maintain that maintenance?
So it would just be a regular property run and operated by the Caldwell Housing Authority. So
now you know the one across the street there, next to the student workplace.
mhm.
I'm sure you want to do something down there next to that.
Yeah, because my goal is to get that property too.
I wish somebody would.
Me too.
I
Mhm.
So I would think before you even consider moving something out there, you might wanna take a look at that one across the street, see what goes on down there. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah,
But I would be in support of something to see, how this thing would pencil out. Long run.
Any other questions? Great, thank you, Mike. Much appreciated. Mr. Hilty, was everything as stated, perfectly fine? I mean, the things, that Mike was asking about and asking for, that's within our purview to, consider?
Chairman, yeah, as Mike indicated, the Urban Renewal Authority powers are broad. It sounds like there's some traction for this, at least. I will work up the question in a little bit more detail concerning required in that deed restriction, tie it to our plan.
Very good, thank you. Great, that ends our presentations this evening. Takes us to public comments. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the Urban Renewal Agency on matters of concern that are not listed in the agenda? Not seeing any. That takes us to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion in regard to the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move we move consent calendar items number 2 and 3 to new business for further discussion rather than consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Warwick, a second by Mr. Doty. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I move we approve the consent calendar as amended.
Very good. We have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
We do have a second, and we'll give this one to Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Very good. This takes us up to the first item of our old business, an update report from our URA treasurer, the status of the projects and funding appropriations. Rochelle, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to pass these out real quick before I get going.
Yes. Plugged in.
Okay, so we've created a project list together of current projects that the Urban Renewal Agency is working on, as requested from the last meeting. The first section highlights projects that have been approved and are currently in progress for other taxing districts within the Urban Renewal Agency. As you know, the Urban Renewal Agency has revenue sources coming in not just from the city of Caldwell, but also from other taxing districts. And we gave them some decision-making into projects that would benefit them in their district with use of their increment funding. The next section of projects listed is the city projects that we have identified, most of which have already started and are in progress and or close to completion. There's 2 columns of information here on this spreadsheet. The first column is the amount of the original budget and the budget we currently have today. And then the remaining amount is the second column, which identifies how much is left. The projects with very minimal amounts left are close to, if not completed. Obviously, the amounts with higher remaining amounts are projects that are on the verge of just starting and moving forward. The priority projects in the blue category, these are projects which you will see come forward either tonight or at the next council meeting that are priority projects that we have identified. And the last section is for requests pending for potential projects that could be funded. Just to give you an overview of cash and availability and everything like that from a financial standpoint. I put in a reconciliation down at the bottom. It identifies how much cash we have on hand, which ties to the financial report you should have received in your packet. This is the total of the project account, the city project account, and the special district account, so it includes the cash for both. We reduced that value by the amount of the job creation fund. That was a separate bucket of money that is also listed on the financial report, set aside for operations and things to fund this upcoming urban renewal season as we go into this next year with very minimal revenue sources coming in. The next two categories are funds that have yet to be spent or checks that have not yet cleared for tonight's request for approved items as well as the last council's request for approved items. And then you have the projected and budgeted operating costs for this upcoming fiscal year, as well as some final bond payments that will be made to leave you with, and then we have our projected revenue source coming in for the fiscal year 23. You can see that the total remaining is the value of the total projects remaining that we have on hand. Now, as we go through this next year of deciding, where are we going to put our money, you can look at this spreadsheet and identify that essentially all these projects are encumbering the total of the funds. The requests pending are the projects that we probably have some leeway that are yet to be approved that will be coming forward, and we have projects as of tonight that are coming to you guys to ask for funding. You guys are constantly on, well, do we have the money, Treasurer? Do we have it? And it's hard for me to say, yes, I can guarantee that the funding is going to be available, or no, it's not. It's not, for me, it's not a matter of, do we have the money? We've already obligated the money. But it's a matter of, what do we want to prioritize? What do you guys want to see for your city? What returns do you want to get? Whether it be entertainment value or historical value, or downtown improvements, slum and blight. These are all issues that we face with the city, and it's going to be your decision as we close up this urban renewal district to identify what you want to prioritize in terms of what you want to fund. I can continue to prepare this report for you on a monthly basis to identify where we're at with projects, reconciling it to the cash. So as time goes on, you'll see these remaining balances in the projects decrease as well as the funding decrease, which will give you an idea of where you have some leeway in these requests pending, and if you want to reprioritize funds from an existing project to something you might find that's a higher priority. That being said, I also want to make sure you guys are aware, as Housing Authority states, economy right now, the cost of projects are increasing significantly. These budgeted numbers we have in here, especially particular the U-Stick widening project, which is one of the biggest projects here. We've got a little bit encumbered here under the city, as well as some additional funding provided by the Canyon Highway District from their increment. And it's likely that some of these projects will go over budget. That being said, from a finance perspective, I want to kind of say, let's leave some room for a buffer. But we do, and I know that the mayor is aware and the city is aware that if these fall short, it will ultimately come back to the city for funding. So keep that in mind as well. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Rochelle?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Doty.
So Rochelle, I'm just trying to get down exactly what you're saying, and of course, there's plenty of numbers on here, but so far, we have to fund the URE projects from the city of Caldwell that are, I guess, in the orange or brown section, right? So meaning the priority projects and requests pending, we haven't voted to fund those yet, or have we? Correct.
Priority projects, you'll see there's actually an item on the agenda tonight to approve that, I think, for the Lions Park irrigation, or was it Levy Park? I think it was Lions Park irrigation. Yeah, Lions Park irrigation. So that, identifies here pending resolution tonight as to whether or not you want to approve. And the rest of these, I think Rob is working hard on trying to get something to you for the next council meeting. Currently going out to bid for a lot of these projects to try and get them moving forward and going before we sunset.
Mr. Doty?
So if we use just all the money that is encumbered already, from the top down to priority projects, can you give me like, if they don't go up, and I understand what you're saying, that with inflation they may,
Mm-hmm.
what do we need to pay out to complete those projects we've already approved, and what is left for us to decide? And that's my issue here, is we have all of these things in front of us, but we don't really have a number. So if we paid all the bills that we're obligated to pay, and I get what you're saying, if we run out of money, the city's still obligated to pay those. But from an urban renewal standpoint, if we pay everything we've approved already, what's left in the pot?
So it would essentially be the total of the amount currently requesting pending, which is approximately 3.5 million, 3.350, et cetera, on the request pending. So that's the current amount. You'll notice that the budget amount and the remaining amount are the same because we haven't had any costs flow through for those yet. So those are funds where they're pending approval from you and potential reassignment from you as to whether or not you want to reprioritize those funds.
Correct, and I understand that's 3.5 million if none of the current approved projects run over budget.
Yeah, just under 3.5.
I have.
Okay. Rochelle, I have a quick comment and a question. By urban renewal taking on a lot of the infrastructure projects that we have here, what has that done with like the street fund or some of the other funds within the city books?
So currently, you guys are seeing, well, if you've been here for a while or if you were around for last year, and the city has seen an increase to fund balance in streets specifically and in the general fund. A lot of that is due to the fact that we are focusing on completing urban renewal projects, and urban renewal projects are being funded by urban renewal. So the city, the street department, and the general fund are getting monies back to assist for these projects. And because all of our energy and resources right now are going into these projects, we don't have the time and energy to spend in resources for other city projects that are not urban renewal related. And that's why you're seeing this increase in fund balance specifically with streets and general fund, because had we, take urban renewal out of the picture, we would be spending those monies from the general fund, from the street department, and doing projects associated with that. A lot of these projects are related to streets and or we're having the cost come from the general fund because we know that urban renewal is gonna supplant that. And so that's how it's affecting. And it's mainly just the general fund and the street fund that are seeing increases in fund balance due to the uptick and the priority to get these projects done now.
So from my layman's perspective, if I look at the request pending and it has USTIC widening the Indian Creek Bridge, if we said, no, that's off the table, and we wanted to use that money for other requests that have come in that look viable and promising and a wise way forward, we could just strike that and use those monies for new requests. But the street fund would then, the gains that the street fund has seen would take care of
Yes.
that.
Most of these improvements, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these requests pending are gonna happen regardless. The TVCC remodel, that, the mayor's pretty, wanting to move forward, and these things are gonna happen regardless of, assuming other factors, but all intents and purposes, they have to happen. The USTIC, Indian Creek Bridge, it's part of the widening, it has to happen. The railroad fees, they're still gonna want their fees. So these are things that will have to be funded, if not funded by urban renewal. And most likely from the street department, since that's where some of it's coming in, maybe a little bit from the general fund.
Okay. Mr. Doty?
Maybe you can answer this one. So we have not approved anything on the priority projects list yet. I understand there's something on the agenda tonight, but
Right.
so same thing there, as
Mhm.
the funds, as we I know we're getting really close to the end, but we could also scratch any of those as well.
Sure.
I just wanna
Mhm.
make sure that anything from the priority projects list down,
Anything without a,
Not
a
approved.
resolution, yeah, anything that we
Yeah,
haven't,
the items above, I've listed resolutions that have
Mhm.
tied to project approval, whether it's design or, construction, those types of things, they've already been approved by resolution.
so we actually do have some flexibility, even though it feels like things are a little out of control.
Yes, if you take this for the letter of the law, we have no money left.
Right.
But in reality, there's a little bit of flexibility because of the way the funding flows through.
Okay.
Okay?
Any, other questions for Rochelle? Thank you, Rochelle.
You're welcome.
This takes us to our second item of old business. It's an action item. It's to consider a resolution approving the execution of a professional services agreement with Cushing Terrell Architects and Engineers for schematic design of modifications at the Nancola Center. Rob, are you speaking to this, or is anybody speaking to this?
Both of these things are things we haven't approved.
where are we at?
Right here. So consent. We took them off and put them on action.
Yeah, they're going to new business. Old business number 2. Old business 2. Yep.
Is it 37, 380? 380.
Well, 'cause we moved it
She
down.
moved it. Yeah. Mm.
35,000. Hi, Rob.
7th Avenue Plaza.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, I apologize, I'm not very prepared to speak to this, but I know what it's about, and, the whole intent here is that the city is planning to, at some point, to vacate, City Hall and the Development Services Building at 621 Cleveland. And the intent is to, move, a majority of the city staff into TVCC. And so, what we have here is the, basically the agreement with, Cushing Terrell to start doing some preliminary design work on the layout and how the floor space is gonna be used, for that project. And I keep losing my cursor here.
And old business.
So the design fee, for Cushing Terrell would be $35,000, and that basically includes all of the layout, working with the different departments, finding out what type of accommodations they need. And I believe that would put together a preliminary conceptual design. Once that's completed, then if the city was still planning to move forward, then they would need to go and have an actual design put together. And then construction would be proceeded after that. And with that, I don't have too much else to add. I know that this is something that the mayor is very interested in. And I think for city staff, the way that we're overflowing in our buildings and trying to find enough accommodations for the employees that we have, this is probably a very logical next step into moving into this facility. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Rob?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Doty?
No questions, just a comment. Our city staff is definitely crammed in there pretty tight. And so however
Any other comments or questions of Rob?
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
so,
Warwick?
I don't know that it's a question for Rob, but so this 35,000, would that be then part of this $1 million for the TVCC remodel? That's under priority project, or under request pending?
Yeah, and so the way that works is, Urban Renewal has the authority to use up to $1 million going into a building rehab, and Mr. Hilty can correct me if I'm wrong. Once you exceed that, then it does require a more extensive vote of the people to use more funds than that, but you can go up to that $1 million, and so that's your threshold basically. And this would be part of that process, so this is the 35,000 that would be coming out of that, what would be a total of 1 million that could be used up to this project. Anything that is above and beyond the 1 million, I presume, would then be coming out of city funds.
Okay.
And that is my understanding of what we're looking at.
Although it is still pending and not approved.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion in regard to this resolution? And I'll read it here. Approve a resolution authorizing an agreement with Cushing Terrell for preliminary design work pursuant to Idaho Code 67-2320.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Doty?
I'll make a motion that we approve the 35,000, not the 1 million, so you know.
Very good.
35,000 in regards to the,
Thank you for the,
want me to name what it is exactly? Resolution authorizing agreement with Cushing Terrell for the preliminary design work pursuant to Idaho Code 67-2320.
okay, we have,
Can I
Rochelle, would you
comment
like to?
real quick?
Yes.
We will be meeting and having some special meetings as well in December to kind of identify the disparity between what you just are confirming, you know, I'm gonna approve this 35, how much is left to be approved of the project, which is a number I didn't give you tonight. It's a whole nother column of information that we are working on. And after we know a little bit more, come December, we're gonna have some special meetings to specifically identify those remaining funds, so that we do have that final approval before we go. I think we have to have that going into this next year, so just FYI on that.
Very good, thanks. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick? Yes. Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes. That brings us to our next action item of old business, point number 3. Consider a request authorizing approval of a funding partnership as requested by Destination Caldwell in the amount of $245,000 from the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency for the implementation of the signage infrastructure project identified in the downtown Caldwell wayfinding and parking signage plan. This is something that we've visited now for a couple of months now. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would just like some more time to study this and give it, we still have 1 more month, correct?
We do.
And maybe get with them a little bit so I can do more research and see where exactly the 245, I know it's in the packet as well, I just haven't had much time to do a line by line check on it yet.
Okay.
I don't see it here either. And
No, it's not.
pending or anything.
Yep. It's just, again, like the other 2 requests we've heard tonight, it's gonna be one of those
Yeah.
down to the wire.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Moore?
I would like to do the same thing, have a little bit more time as research. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Very good. So we will table that. And Ms. Rossi, do you want to make a couple of comments?
Just if I can, as the chair
Sure.
of Destination Caldwell, again, thank you for your consideration, and happy to come back a month from now and answer any questions, if you wanna shoot some our way, so we can be a little bit more prepared. Happy to do that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your patience.
I'm prepared to, so if I could just find more hours in the day.
Let me know if you find it.
Takes us to our next action item. It's to consider a resolution approving development and disposition agreement, a DDA, with Aztec Development for the property located at Kimball and Arthur. Alternatively, consider termination of negotiation with Aztec Development and instruct staff to issue a renewed request of proposal pursuant to Idaho Code 50-2011 for agency property at Kimball and Arthur. Good evening, Mr. Hilty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. I am I am partly responsible for the 89-page contract in your packet that I'm going to go over here over the next couple of hours. Hopefully, you're somewhat familiar with the DDAs. It's a similar format to what we have used in the past, particularly for the Creekside development. I'm going to hit on what I think are the important parts of it, and then certainly stand for any questions you have regarding anything that you're seeing there. I do want to point out there have been some last-minute updates to this. It was rushed out the door to make sure we got it in your packet. There were typos, significant typos in the table of contents. That's been completely updated. There were a few additional typos that were located throughout. They are non-substantive. I would certainly point those out to you if they were, but basically formatting type issues and those types of things. So there is a bit of an updated version. Ken Senga has signed that version for Aztec Development. So if you're ready to go forward tonight after this presentation and authorize execution, then we'll be underway with this project. I want to start by going to kind of describe what the project is. Rob has pulled up on the screen the concept plan. This is tab 3, so this is part of the contract, and the obligation is to construct the buildings consistent, relatively consistent, substantially consistent with this concept design plan. It's a 2-phase project. Phase 1 will be the first floor, approximately 8,400 square feet of retail and commercial space and pedestrian-supported amenities to be constructed on the property and the adjoining property. Now, as I think you're aware, the agency only owns about half of this site. Mr. Senga has, for Aztec Development, is contracted to purchase the other half of the site. The obligation that he's entering into with the agency is to develop the entire site. So what's over there now is a dirt lot behind the plaza stage. What you're seeing depicted here covers the entire site. So phase 1 is the first floor, and I get that that's a little bit difficult to see based on these renderings. But the first phase would begin within 360 days of closing. Closing is likely to occur in the first quarter of 2023. There are some things that we need to do to get to where we're at closing, which is the way all of these development agreements work. Phase 2 would commence within 270 days of completion of phase 1. That is up to 4 stories, but a minimum of 25 residential units. Those may be apartments. They may also be condominiums, and the flexibility is left for the developer to consider what the market needs are at that point and how to profitably develop it. But the obligation that he would have is to build 25 units there. Again, that would commence within 270 days of completion of phase 1, but there is an additional caveat worked into the contract on the schedule. It would not have to commence until the Creekside development, which is 140 residential units, is 90% full. I'm guessing that they will be at that level shortly after it's completed. There is high demand for downtown residential uses. So 270 days but not before, I should say. The Creekside has achieved a 90% occupancy rate for its residential units, 2 years after the initial opening of the Creekside development. So even if they're not filling up their apartments, this one still has a deadline, a necessary mandatory deadline for going forward. There will be a very detailed schedule of performance. I've given you sort of the high level. We'll break it down into, when do you have to have design done? When do you have to have permits? When do you have to have title completed? When do you have to have your proof of financing? Those will be worked into a detailed schedule of performance that'll be added here within 30 days. But it'll be consistent with that overall scheduling for the major milestones that I've just outlined. Okay. Agency will provide for a survey of the site, which makes sense because we'll be combining lots here that are under separate ownership. That'll occur within 45 days, as will Mr. Senga's obligation to provide evidence of financing for the project. So we'll know in a relatively short period of time that he's got the necessary financial backing to build phases 1 and 2. Consistent with our other RFP sites downtown, the obligation of the agency is to make the site shovel-ready. That will mean looking at, right now it's bare ground. We'll have to make sure that there's an assessment of environmental conditions. Everything we know about this site now is that it is clean, but that's what we thought about the Creekside site, and we thought that about the movie theater site.
Mm-hmm.
And as both of those went up, there was some contaminated soil encountered. It wasn't a big deal in either of those cases. If it happens here, it will similarly shouldn't be a big deal. But this is part of the incentive to the development community that goes out originally in the RFP, that we're going to be providing these sites ready for redevelopment. So that obligation continues, and it's folded into the DDA. Other things that could potentially come up would be, if we find utility lines, if we find, something in the way of the foundation, that may have to be compacted, removed, something like that. Those would be obligations of the agency under the definition of shovel-ready. The contract then contains the typical progress reports, design review by the agency. As final design decisions are made, those will need to be submitted to the agency and approved. Staff will take a look at those first and then bring them to you at a regularly scheduled meeting for your approval. It's got our standard insurance and indemnification provisions. Now let's talk about, Rob, did you go through those three? There's 3 slides there that compose attachment 3. Okay. So I'm going to kind of move on a little bit from the actual project. Yeah, I'm not quite there, but you can move on to the next one. Any questions at this point about what's proposed here?
Mark, one thing that we had talked about was we incentivized them at one point, or we teased them a little bit with $500,000 for parking, and that's completely been...
And let me move on. I was, and I will stand for questions at the end. I am going to cover that. I was talking more about sort of before we changed screens on you, if you were done looking at the design plan. Let's talk about incentives. The incentives that are offered, and this is consistent with the RP, is the reuse appraisal process. That means the property will be sold for its reuse appraisal value, which is likely to be 0 in this situation, given the magnitude of the development, which again bears on what happens to property value. Frankly, what I'd anticipate is it's going to have a negative property value, which under the terms of our agreement means a 0 purchase price. That is probably the primary incentive. This is also depicting some alley and right-of-way areas that will be improved at agency expense. Rob, is this a pointer here? You wouldn't be able to see it behind you anyway, so I'll try to speak through it. Or use the mouse, yeah. So let's go up to the alley first. And Brent has prepared this schematic, and it is also an attachment exhibit to the DDA. The instruction that we had from the agency when we looked at this prior was not to create a pool of money that would be available for a laundry list of different types of project components. Again, all those would have to be consistent with what the agency has the authority to fund. But we did something like that for the Creekside project, and they are working their way through that pool of money. This was a little bit different. It was, we can do improvements in the right-of-way to incentivize this project, but we're going to be in control of what that is. It's not a generally available pool of money. So there's 2 things here that are depicted together. And so we start in the alleyway, which is to the north side, right there where the cursor is. The idea, that alleyway is undergoing some improvements that include undergrounding the overhead electricity. It's also going to be beautified with a pedestrian and walkable surface that has some aesthetic connection to the plaza. So it's going to be kind of a pedestrian walkway that will be similar in design to what is at the plaza. There's also a bulb out there at the end of the alleyway to facilitate and kind of shortens the pedestrian run across the street there to the plaza. And then to the extent in that alleyway or the bulb out, there are, the standard downtown decorative components. This is something that the agency is going to be doing. It is something that we were likely to do anyway. And some of this has been underway. I think we've been talking to Idaho Power about the undergrounding project, but it will be a nice amenity adjacent to a new development. And so we did, the DDA does commit the agency to do this. Again, we thought we were going to be doing it anyway. The second component then would be right-of-way improvements. And those are going to be along that Kimball frontage and the Arthur frontage. Brent has reported that those features are relatively new and they're all in pretty good shape, and there's not much that needs to be done there. But there is a pool of resources, not a pool of resources. It simply says, to the extent that there are required improvements there, or reasonably necessary improvements. If we identify something that is broken or something that needs to be fixed or a tree that needs to be replaced or a grate or whatever, the agency would be responsible for those. But there is not significant reworking of any of that frontage, either on Arthur or on Kimball, that needs to be done. There is a capped allowance for repair of damage. So Brent feels like it's likely that any contractor is going to potentially damage some of that frontage as they start to construct and go through the construction process. There's a $15,000 allowance for repair of that damage. So any damage beyond that would be the responsibility of the contractor or the developer, but the agency would be setting aside $15,000 to restore damage to the existing right-of-way improvements that might be caused during the course of construction. That's the incentive. And then the parking. So the parking is similar to it's 25 spaces. The terms of the parking permits are going to be similar to what was done for Creekside, but with basically the Creekside parking is a combination of permitted lots that'll be for downtown business owners and their employees, plus the users from the Creekside residential development. These will be just general, we will identify general parking areas that are off-street. So again, we're probably primarily going to be looking at along the tracks over there. And the permit allows the permit holder to park without respect to time restraints or time limits and without having to pay. But there are no guaranteed parking spaces. There are no specific set-aside spaces. There's just lots where those permits will be valid. So we'll bring that along and develop it in connection with the permitting process for Creekside as we move forward on parking. Remedies for breach are standard. There are general contractual remedies for breach, which would include damages. It also includes specific performance, which means if Mr. Singh is just simply not doing what he is required to do, or if the agency wasn't doing what it's obligated to do, you could sue to have the court require that to be done. Specific performance, a little bit of an unusual remedy, but it is provided for in this contract. Damages are not excluded, and there is also an ongoing option for the agency to buy back the property if he does not pursue the project. Now, I should point out, all of these remedies apply after the property is actually transferred to Mr. Senga. If the property is not ever transferred to him, then we all just walk away. Okay, so he'll have deadlines coming up within the next 30 days and 45 days. One of the conditions, of course, of going forward is that he has to close on the property next door. If he doesn't do that, then all of this goes away. So we'll be marking those things on the calendar and bringing back reports to you. So we're not going to get into a situation where we have a long period of time where nothing's happening and the only remedy that we're looking at is walking away. Once construction starts, It has to be completed, under the schedule of performance that we've outlined, phases 1 and phase 2, and if at some point that doesn't happen, the agency has the right to buy back the development. And so that's gonna be an interesting remedy depending on how far along construction is. We would likely need to be working with a different developer to take over the project, but we would have the right to take it away, for Mr. Senga if he doesn't proceed to, complete the project in the way that, the contract obligates him to. That concludes my rundown, I guess, of the major components of the, DDA. I'd certainly stand for any questions you have.
Questions for Mr. Hilty?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Doty?
you mentioned something, Mr. Hilty, about pay for a survey and then he ensures that he gets financing. Are you saying that the urban renewal in this agreement would pay for a survey of the property? Did I hear that correctly? How much is that for us to pay for the survey?
Rob, do you know what a survey would cost for the, ATLA survey at the site?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Doty, an ALTA survey for this site could be somewhere in the ballpark of $5,000 to $8,000 maybe to do a full survey and put the documents together. It could be less than that. I haven't requested one of those in a while, so I'm not exactly sure what the cost would be. A typical boundary survey would be in the ballpark of maybe 1,500 or 2,000.
So, Mr. Hilty, what is our total cost? You're mentioning all the drawings,
Yeah.
that grant. Again, we're talking about finances. Clearly, we've had an update on it. It's somewhat of a concern, even though 3.5 million is a chunk of money. What is our obligation to this project?
And I intended to cover that. Thank you for the question. What we have set aside for this project is the $500,000 the chairman referred to. Now, that's been allocated to this project for many months, and it arose at the time that we started to look at, what our glide path toward completion was, and what projects were out there. What we were discussing with Mr. Senga was him creating 21 off-site parking spaces on site, and that would have been in a below-grade parking structure. In exchange for that $500,000, then the agency would have been, or the city would have been the beneficiary of some of that parking, been able to use it as permitted parking or public parking, however we wanted to. The discussion really never got to the point where we had a final proposal because that underground parking was deemed to be infeasible from an engineering standpoint. It was just the access wasn't working. The cost of it, I don't think, was working. Yet, we left the $500,000 sort of allocated to this project. The cost that we would have in the ATLA survey, the $15,000 set aside for damage to right-of-way, any minor right-of-way improvements along Arthur or Kimball, and then more significantly, the alleyway, and those improvements are gonna be far less than that $500,000. I don't have a specific number for you.
Mr. Doty?
Is that accounted for out of the?
Yeah,
it's project
under the.
Is that the alley,
we're
is that
trying to
the alley
figure out-
improvements to the compactor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right here. Alley improvements to the trash compactor.
Haven't,
We haven't approved it. This
haven't
is
approved it,
pending.
so that would be
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
$500,000 on top of 3.5.
We have a project
Correct.
estimate just for the alleyway.
I'd like to know what everybody else thinks about that. Mr. Senga said a lot of things too.
That's true.
Questions for Mr. Hilty? So tonight, basically, the decision in front of us is, up or down.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it possible to hear from Mr. Jenkins on that? Put him on the spot for a
I
second.
believe so. Stephen, would you take some questions?
He's always smiling.
Lower this to my height for a minute, but good evening. How can I help?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Doty.
I just want you to speak freely on what you think about the project. You've obviously spent the most time here. I've been here, I don't even know if I've been here a year, maybe a year on this committee, and I just want to know what you're feeling about this project. You've seen all the things, we've gone through quite a few things just since I've been here in a year. It seems like it's been going on a long time, and I just looking for your professional opinion of what your comments are on the project.
Yes, Chairman, Commissioner Doty, thank you for that question. It has been a long road. I think this has been, gosh, close to exceeded a year. Is that about right? Somewhere in there. So it has been frustrating. I'd mentioned in previous meetings that we've worked on this particular RFP site, that we've gone through a cycle of a couple of prospects to come in here. The one that I was most acquainted with before this project was Site A Brewing, coming out of LeGrand. That was a brewery that was looking to do a building there. That didn't work out, so we had to move to this RFP, and it has been a very long road. So in looking at this project, what I am encouraged by is that our RFPs that we have put out most recently have gained a lot of attention. So I was going to share in my comments here with my report that the 510 Arthur RFP just closed, and we had a very good turnout for that. 516 Main Street RFP, of course, was very good in terms of attracting different prospects to consider that project. So I'm encouraged by that sign. The one thing I'll say with this one is I'm hopeful. I'm holding out hope that we can get to the finish line here, but I just want to see something happen. I want to see something happen for the city. It's such a prominent location here at Arthur and Kimball that we want to make sure that we see some activity on this parcel here. So I think all that to say, long-winded way, I'm hopeful that the outcome will be positive, but I am losing hope. I'm just be candid with you. I'm looking at this and saying, gosh, it's been a long road, and I am hopeful, but each week that passes is certainly one that I certainly tally it up and say, gosh, it's been a long time coming.
Other questions for Stephen?
No, thank you though, Stephen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think one of the difficulties that we face, I don't know about anybody else, but we are kind of backed into or painted into a corner, is that if we walk away, we're going to have two separate pieces of property. We're going to have the one that we own versus the one that Mr. Sanga will own. So we're not looking at probably one joint project. We'll be looking at, things that are cobbled together. So
I've got some more questions, though. It's a pretty big decision, if that's okay.
yes,
So, Mr.
certainly.
Hilty, if you don't mind, maybe you can educate me here just a little bit. Does it seem like there's a stall here by Mr. Singa that I'm unaware of? Am I just feeling that in my gut? Like, should he have his finances in a row already, knowing that we may approve this, or is it common just to wait to see if we throw money at it if he goes and spends? And maybe that's not the way it is, but that's my perception of how it feels, is we're doing a lot of stuff up front, and then he says, then I'll do this. But we never get anywhere with it, is what it seems like to me. Or it's by little, but the more we put into it, he gives just a little enough to keep us dragging along, is what my perception is.
Yeah, let me go backwards into that, because I think there's two separate questions there. So taking the last one first, it's been a long time to get to this point, and some of this, some of the delay had to do with the acquisition of that adjoining property, or at least getting it under contract, and an opportunity and that's how I look at it, Mr. Chairman. In one respect, we're painted into a corner. Another, it's an opportunity to have the entire site developed together. That presented, some changes from what Mr. Sanga originally proposed that we had to work through.
But we even did that for him, so to speak.
It took us too long to get to this point. I don't disagree. With respect to the evidence of financing, this is a standard provision that we've done with all the different developers. We put them under contract, and then they get pretty serious about their design. and they start spending some bucks on design, and he has been spending some money on this. But we need to know what he's gonna build, in a fairly significant level of detail, and that translates into dollars he's gonna have to invest, and that usually comes as soon as the contract is signed. Then he'll work up those design plans for purposes of determining what the project cost is going to be, right? So then he comes forward with a meaningful evidence of financing. He certainly presented evidence of financing like everybody else does with their RFP response, meaning that the banks are saying, yes, we know this person, we worked with him, he's creditworthy, we're interested in doing the loan, but exactly what the project's going to look like, comes after the closing. It's a 45-day period. The other thing we need that design for is to determine, the reuse appraisal of the property. And then, so there's things that have to start falling into place right away. You know, I think by the first of the year, if we're still having struggles, you know, that's the point in time when some deadlines may have come and gone, and, you know, we may be looking at this thing again.
So, my understanding though is if he doesn't meet that requirement within that first 30 or 45 days, whatever you said, all we would be out at that point would just be for the survey, is that correct?
That's correct.
We wouldn't be obligated to do all the street improvements and all of that or at some point we'd have to come back and say you didn't meet your obligation.
Yeah, if again, remember there's this period of time prior to closing, right, where the remedy is, if there's a breach, then the remedy is you terminate the agreement. And these time frames are, that's what attorneys call of the essence of the contract, meaning the material terms. So if we start blowing by deadlines after we're under contract, that is a breach.
No, what are your, anybody else have any thoughts? I can't force anyone to speak, but.
Okay. Do we have a motion in regard to the resolution?
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, we've gone this far with him. And we're at the point of, you know, he's already signed the agreement. Mr. Hilty, is that correct? So he signed it. Okay, so he's done what we've asked him to do at this point, so I almost think we'd be kind of not doing what we said we would do, you know, if we didn't go through with it at this point.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is. My motion is to approve the DDA between Senga and us for the property at Kimball and Arthur.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second by Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, folks. This brings us to our economic development activity report with Mr. Jenkins.
All right, Chairman, Commissioners, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Just going to start, as I typically do, with miscellaneous updates. The first of which is Federated Ordnance. I know we've talked a lot about them. They are Federated Ordnance and Nemo Arms combined as one company. We recently toured their building. That building is a massive 265,000 square feet in Sky Ranch. Equipment's coming in. They're going to start to plan some light production here in the short term. So a really exciting venue for the Caldwell, and an opportunity to have a great operator in our community. So that's a terrific one. Phelan Development, they're on the corner of Smead and Highway 2026. This is a 17-acre parcel out there. They're planning to break ground this month, is what I understand. So I think just after Thanksgiving. And they're doing a multi-building project in East Caldwell. This is speculation industrial space that will be available for lease or sale. So that's a good opportunity for folks to come into the market of various sizes. So there'll be 4 buildings there. And just a quick update on the Idaho Power substation. I know during our last meeting, we were approached by Idaho Power to assist with putting some land under contract for a future substation location. That request has gone away. Idaho Power has found some end-of-year dollars that's enabling them to proceed without our assistance with urban renewal. So just want to save you guys $10,000 there. You're welcome. So there you go. It's one of those things. It wasn't me, but no, they're a great partner, obviously, and they're taking strides to get to the same objectives that we are. So I really appreciate their efforts in securing land, and of course, we're going to support them along the way as well. Petainer, this is a project that was a BVEP and Commerce lead. Petainer, they are a lightweight plastic manufacturer. They are an international company, so they have locations in Europe, the UK, Canada, Asia. This is their third facility in the United States, here in Caldwell. They have another one in Tennessee and another one in California. They'll be operating out at the Industrial Way Business Park, right off of I-84. So great win for the city there, and we were competing with some other areas, so that was a really nice one. Project Hard is a big box. They're still looking for space in East Caldwell. They have found in a site that they're pursuing, so we'll see where things lead with that one. But I just think that as soon as we get that one anchor user in terms of a big box user, then we'll get some smaller shopping opportunities around that, which we desperately need here in the city. LPC West, this is the site that Urban Renewal had owned and had put out for RFP. They were awarded the RFP. Their groundbreaking slated for November 30th. So really excited about that one. It's going to be cold, but I can't wait to see some shovels get in the ground out there. Project Trailblazer, this was a BVEP lead. We actually had a site visit with this group today. They're considering the Boise area. Have really whittled it down to Canyon County specifically, so I'm optimistic for the outcome on that one. The visit was great, and we're hopeful that they'll come and operate in our community. And then moving on to North Caldwell, Project Energize, they're continue to be interested in the North Caldwell area. They're investigating a large parcel in North Caldwell in the Urban Renewal District. They're a food processor. They'd be a great addition to the area as a whole. Project Florence, this is a Department of Commerce lead. They're a food processor as well. They are looking for 160 acres roughly in North Caldwell. Project 26, we continue to work with these developers. This is the former Mink site that's out there. They are gearing up for construction in Q3 of 2023. Of course, we're working with them on logistics issues, those types of concerns. Rob McDonald here, our city engineer, our public works director, Brent Orton, we've been collaborating to find solutions for them, but they're very proactive in working to develop that site. Project P&W, the plans continue to move forward on this one. Of course, they have a site that they are very, very interested in North Caldwell. We continue to make strides on that one. Project Natural, this is a national manufacturer, has an interest in supporting agribusiness. Of course, that's in great alignment with what we've done historically here in the area. They're considering a 40-acre site in the North Caldwell region. Project Grizzly continues to move forward. They're a commercial sales operator. I continue to be in close contact with them as well. And then Project Imagine, this was sad news, so to speak, but one of the things that's come out of this, so the project's on hold for now as the economy does what it does, and ultimately transitioning within the company itself from a leadership standpoint has caused them to press the pause button for now, which means they could come back, but it also has allowed us to move forward with some big utility plans, utility infrastructure improvement plans in the area. So I count it as a win either way because, of course, they helped to kickstart many of our negotiations early on with our utility partners. And, of course, where we are today in the North Caldwell region is dramatically different because of their presence. So I'm hopeful that they'll come back. I'll keep you all posted on where things are at. And then annexation, we received consent forms by 3 residents along that Chicago street corridor. These properties, in my belief, will allow us to have that continuity that we're looking for the county properties that are just north of that area. So we'll move forward with what I presume to be an application for annexation in the near future for City Council to consider. And then downtown updates, 510 Arthur RFP, I alluded to that in my earlier comments. We received 4 proposals on that one. That one closed last week. So I'll be pinging you all soon for a special meeting to discuss who staff might recommend for that site. But really encouraged by the outcome of that one. We have some strong projects, and I think will, quite frankly, be game changers in that particular area of downtown. And the last thing I'll mention is Project Italy. Ophelia and I met with the restaurant group from Ada County. We toured with them a couple weeks ago, and they're interested in multiple sites that fit their brand in Caldwell downtown. So we're hopeful that we can land this great group, great operator. We're trying to keep those fresh ideas coming into Caldwell despite the economic conditions that are out there. I think regardless of what happens, we'll bounce back pretty quickly from that. So we'll be ready for it. With that, I stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Jenkins? Mr. Moore?
Mr. Jenkins, tell me, so, as these, opportunities come in, how do you prioritize the existing property owners, business owners, taxpayers? How do we put those in?
That's a great question, Commissioner Moore. We always are looking for ways to support and help businesses expand and grow in Caldwell. Actually, the jobs that are created are not from the new companies coming in. Most jobs that are created, they're from existing companies that are just expanding or growing our community. So we're making sure that we have touch points with them. Of course, that's really a business retention expansion, BRE program that we really would like to leverage more of here in the community. But because we've been just historically busy, I mean, it is just a really wild season of growth in the city. We haven't been able to have as many touch points as we would have liked over the past year or so. But that is something that we are hoping to do, is just get out there and make sure that the current businesses that are operating feel that they have the resources they need in order to grow and to continue to operate here in Caldwell. Whenever we hear of a business in crisis or a business that's in need of workforce or any of those matters, we always are responsive to those needs. But I think from my standpoint, what I'd like to do is just be more proactive, be more preemptive in the sense of reaching out and saying, hey, how can we help you? How are you doing? That kind of thing. So we are working on that. And I think as the new inquiries that come in may hit a little bit of a slowdown, perhaps. I'm just speculating here, but it could be the case. We'll have a little more time to get out there, boots on the ground, to make those touch points happen.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question for you. Mr. Jenkins, so it's a raising rate environment. Business that I'm in, people are seeing this thing, prices are gonna go up on these properties. We better start 7.25. It's not a bad rate. How do you see that? How do you, what's the temperature with people that are calling it, they're looking for opportunities? Is it that way with you, or is it any different? Or, what do you think?
Commissioner Moore, great question again. I think the housing market's going to impact, unfortunately, every sector in the economy, particularly with industrial users. We always get asked about workforce and where folks are going to live, and the affordability issue remains. We have a lot of, interest rates are high, but the prices still remain high and unattainable for a lot. So it just eliminates the pool of potential buyers that are out there, of course. And then when you look at constructing a new building, getting loans for different things, seeing an impact there as well. So quite frankly, we've seen some interesting behaviors from developers that had previously had land under contract or letters of intent on properties, those types of things. We've seen a lot of movement there. So we're just trying to, everything's moving kind of in real time here, but I have seen a little bit of a change, I would say, particularly in the last couple of weeks, where we've seen things be impacted by the overarching economy and perhaps even the elections. That's a factor that we have to throw in there as well. So those are things that we always kind of stay on guard with every election cycle. Of course, those have direct impacts to economic development and decision-making from different companies that are looking to locate here in our community.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Ophelia?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll make my update short because I know Costco closes at 8:30 tonight. So we'll start with Project Farmers Market. This is a business that's growing rapidly and is now seeking permanent space. They currently sell their products only at the farmers markets and throughout the Treasure Valley. Project River, well-established local business that has a presence in Ada County, considering location in Caldwell. This type of business offers a relaxing outdoor pet-friendly area. Currently in Boise, they have about 11,000 square feet of outdoor space. Project Ice, well-established local business out of Ada County with an interesting concept geared towards adults, will consider space in Caldwell. And by adults, I mean bowling and that type of stuff. Project Wolfpack, a local business owner seeking to bring a new concept that offers services to mothers, and it'll be a blend of retail space and healthcare. Project Home, business that is seeking retail space, items for the home. And Project TLC, retail business that is looking for a hybrid model, online and front store. And just a couple business updates. The City of Caldwell, the Mayor's Office is participating in Christmas tree adoption for Indian Creek Plaza, and we'll get that checked to you guys on Wednesday. Oaks Brothers is under new ownership. The new owner is, very involved, wants to be very involved with the city. Her name is Sandy. Businesses continue to deal with workforce shortages, like Steve mentioned. We had one business that just mentioned to me last week that one of the workers didn't show up, no call, didn't show up. She found out, she looked at the camera, and no one had logged in for the day, so we're still dealing with that in our community. Just a business that's opening up here. I've been mentioning Craft Lounge for a bit now, and they are scheduled to open after Thanksgiving. And the reason for that delay of opening is supply chain issues. So Nick is having to build a lot of the counters on his own, so it's taking a little bit of time, but it's looking beautiful in that space. And those are my updates, and I stand for any questions.
Mr. Moore? No.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know our friends at Destination Caldwell are here, and I'm gonna go ahead and defer that question, but my understanding, and I'll have Nicole and Corey correct me on that, was that a lot of these local farmers tend to go to the Boise Farmers Market, and there's other markets happening, but that was some of the information I have, and I'll ask Nicole or Corey to add more to that. One more question. Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So the hybrid model means that they will allow for people to walk into their space, but the majority of their products will be sold online. So you see a lot of that with individuals that want to sell on eBay or just have other markets. They want to also allow for the public to come in here, but the majority of the sales is done online. And that just allows for them to really grow more without having to really hire that much of a workforce and not just solely concentrating on just retail space for the public. No, they're not changing places. Most of these people that want to do the hybrid model, they want that as a permanent space because they also want space to store their items. So it's more permanent, I want to buy a building type of space. Absolutely.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, Ophelia.
Did you want to
Yes.
the answer on the farmer's market?
Mhm. Yeah, no, yeah.
We were gonna come up, Corey, so it broadcasts out, sorry.
No, you're good.
Commissioners, basically that is why, because of the farmers, we're competing with Saturday markets. I believe there's one in Eagle on Saturdays as well that they were competing with, and they didn't want to have three. As you know well aware, before Destination Caldwell became a player in this whole picture, there used to be a smaller one in front of TVCC, and I believe that was on Thursdays. So, and then Nampa does theirs on Thursdays, so Saturdays as well.
Mm.
Like usual, we wanted to be different.
Very good, thanks.
We might as well add one on Saturday.
Why not, right?
No, I don't think that was I think it was canceled the one on Tuesday. Or did you not see much traffic on it? I know when we have the concerts, there's quite a few people. Right,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
Everybody else is on Saturday.
Yeah.
And Tuesday, and regular.
Seems like it was still open Saturday.
Okay, this takes us up to our new business. Our first action item is consider the purchase of property located at 613 Main Street and approval to initiate an RFP for the subject site. You got a lot of nerve.
A lot of nerve, Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to express my nerve here. This, in all truth, is really just me in making an observation of what we have downtown and looking around and seeing if there's a way to continue with the mission, of course, of eliminating slum and blight, as was referenced previously by others giving reports. But for me, in particular, I look at ways to strategize around different buildings, different locations, the prominence of locations. I take all these things into consideration. This particular site is 613 Main Street. I have been here with the city for a little over 3 years, and I'd say that this building has been basically for sale throughout the duration of my time here, my tenure with the city. So it's been listed for a long time, and you might be thinking, gosh, it's at a location on Main Street, it's right across from the Creekside project. There are many attributes that are attractive with this particular location. Those things are all true. The exorbitant price of this building was restrictive to many developers that were considering it. When I first started here, it was around $1.5 million is what was the asking price for this building. Then I believe it came down to about 1.2. There was a broker out of the Boise area that had the building listed for about 6 months. I think they were asking around $900,000, somewhere in there. Then Lee and Associates has had it on the market for the past 8 months. Lee and Associates started off about $825,000. Now they're down to $600,000 for the building. So that's where I am. That's where we are today in terms of the price that they're asking and where they're at with what they would like to get out of that building. So Rob's going through a few photos here. This is actually the appraisal that I had a chance to become acquainted with. So the building was built in 1910. It's about 3,100 square feet. There's 2 parcels actually being considered here. So there's a 0.06 acre site that has the building on the property, and then there's an adjacent parking lot there, and that is 0.09 acres. The market value, according to this appraisal, is $486,500. The building is in very poor condition, as you can tell. I'm just going to go through some of the improvements that I had identified, not just in this report, but in the inspection as well. So, needs a new gas meter. That was removed. Finished paint is needed. The old gas flue is open on the roof. The parking lot needs to be sealed. There are cracks and loose rock evident in the parking lot that's adjacent to this building. Degrading stucco, as you all can acknowledge here with these photos. Detached stucco from the brick wall. Needs a new roof. Could be currently leaking and causing water drainage issues into the building. The roofing material is actually past its life expectancy, so there have been some, I would say, some YouTube improvements up there, if you will. So not holding up to what's needed currently. The masonry repair on the building, of course. Holes in the ceiling and walls. Mold potentially in the building. Remediation might be needed for that. Am I selling the building to you all so far? Okay. All right. Condensation between the windows. No railing on the staircase going up to the stairs. Damaged thermostats. Water damage on the walls. Currently dry, but proves that there was a previous leak from the roof. Open knockouts on the electrical panel. No permit installed for the panel. No power within certain outlets throughout the building. Some are actually scorched. No smoke detectors. Older galvanized pipe will need to be replaced. Evidence of a leak under the sink. No water heater in the building, so there's no hot water in there. So, Chairman, no hot showers, unfortunately, for you if you buy the buildings there. Interior doors are damaged, along with the door frames. Carpet has severe stains. Vinyl is severely damaged. So that's just a brief list of some of the things that are going on with the interior and exterior of the building, including the parking lot. So I also want to mention to you all that there have been very, very strong concerns about the safety and well-being of the neighbors that are in the area as a result of some of the activities that have occurred within this building. So this building, and I looked at just the police reports from here from the city. This is just in 2022. Abandoned vehicle, burglary, fights, abandoned vehicle again, out on vehicle. Don't quite know what that means, but it was recorded. Parking problem, agency assist, and then drug offense. Those are all within this year. So, of course, you have the reports from neighboring groups and people within the downtown core that have identified issues and concerns, but then you have some more tangible police reporting here that's associated with this building. So you might ask yourself, why in the world would the Urban Renewal Agency be interested in this opportunity to potentially purchase? Of course, this is not me, Steve Jenkins, telling you all to spend money that we currently are very limited or have some constraints with. I get that. I totally understand. I'm just trying to help us to see that there could be an opportunity here just to consider. And if it's something we want to move forward with, great. But if it's something that we want to bypass, that works too. But just want to give it as an opportunity to help you all prioritize the list that you have been provided with. One of the things that we can immediately do with this building is extend the parking lot. So, Rob, if you go back to the aerial view of the parking lot that the city currently owns, we can squeeze in a few more parking spots into this parking lot, just in the immediate, right? So I'm thinking perhaps you could squeeze in maybe 10, 11 parking spots into that adjacent lot. The other thing that I was encouraged by, and I mentioned this previously with my statements, was the RFP respondents that we've had. So we have some recent RFPs. This building, of course, has some historical relevance. It was built in 1910. The building is in very, very poor condition, of course. But I look at the Cleveland Event Center, the Mike Muscle project, and that is dramatically different from where it was previously when we had that as an RFP. I didn't see a whole lot of hope with that building. In particular, I didn't see hope with that blue add-on that is adjacent to Kimball. But Mike Muscle has gone and completely transformed that space. He's really helped me to see new life with these buildings, or prospective life with the buildings that are currently dilapidated and, quite frankly, could be considered as a demolition project. But so we do have developers out there with a knack for old buildings that can come in and perhaps fix these buildings up in a way that we never imagined. It just creates more investment opportunities for the city, of course, with different prospects coming in. But if you put it in the open market, as it's been for, 3 years or so, as you can see, the return on investment is very hard to come by for developers, even at the price point that it is today. There's not a whole lot of meat left on the bones, if you will, as you look at the improvements that are necessary to bring this building up to par, including the adjacent parking lot. So just want to reiterate, of course, urban renewal. I did a little research, as others have done, but to improve blight in the community is a major thing that we look at. Of course, this includes buildings that are unsafe or unfit for occupancy, but it also considers inadequate streets, environmental concerns, those types of things. So mitigation is key. So as I looked at the closeout of this district, I just considered all those elements and how that could be an appropriate use for urban renewal funds. But again, this is not me trying to persuade or trying to make this more difficult in an already tenuous situation financially for the agency, but it's something to consider as we close out with different projects that are out there. And if there's $500,000 sitting around somewhere, perhaps that could be applied to this building. But with that, I stand for any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for Steve?
Chair,
Mr. Doty?
I don't know if it's gonna turn to questions or just statements, but I certainly would not overpay for the property if I supported it, which I don't. If we bought the property, I think that we're also, a hidden fee is we're gonna have to tear it down, and who knows what's in there, asbestos or whatever else is going on. I'm kind of surprised the city hasn't condemned it already. I don't know quite how that works, but look at Mr. Hilty, because maybe he had some advice on that, but I just don't think it's worth the expense to it coming down to the end and putting more pressure on the urban renewal to ensure all the other bills are paid. It's just, doesn't seem like it's worth it to me.
Mr. Moore?
Is there any type of environmental rated on it? Typically, type of environmental?
Not that I know of. I don't think there's any record from the city standpoint of any environmental reports that we have.
And if you knock it down, $400,000 for a parking lot, for 11 cars? Pay for what's yeah, to dispose of anything that's
And Chairman, Commissioners, I might add, it does have a shared wall with that adjacent building. So a demo project would be quite difficult at that location. I know we ran into some of those concerns with the Kimball properties that we had an RFP on and that are gonna be redeveloped in the future.
Any other questions for Stephen? Thank-
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I like
Ms.
it,
Warwick.
not a question, I think, but this one, I can't imagine redevelopment on this one. You know, Cleveland Event Center had something nice on the outside to start with. They had a good shell. This doesn't have a good anything. It just doesn't. And it would be great to have something else right there. But I think somebody else is gonna have to do that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Moore?
Just looking at those pictures, that's the first time I've ever seen the side of it. I've walked around and looked at it. I don't think you could say it's beyond that. That's fine.
Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Commissioners. Appreciate it.
Rochelle, you're back up. We're at action item number 2, consider invoices for payment from Urban Renewal Agency Treasurer.
Tonight, we have action items for vendors that we need to pay. You're seeing quite a few on this one today, just because we're trying to close up the prior fiscal year, and so, this is the final reimbursement from the, Urban Renewal to the city. How we cash flow things a lot of times is we have the city pay for the cost, for approved projects and throughout, on a weekly basis. And then monthly, we will submit reimbursement, or quarterly recently. I might go to monthly with the uptick in projects recently, but, so that's why you're seeing an increase here, is because we're getting the final numbers for 2022 for project costs. So all of the ones related to City of Caldwell for reimbursements for those projects. We've also got our standard operating costs listed here. And our total expenditures to be approved is $764,504.23. We don't have any items for ratification. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Rochelle? Okay, do we have a motion to consider these invoices for payment?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Doty. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Warwick. Would the treasurer call the roll, please?
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes, thank you. And let's come right back to you with the monthly cash reconciliation.
Yes.
That way you don't have to wait for some other discussions.
Oh, I didn't bring those reports with me. Sorry. I totally forgot about those, but, I can review them. I prepared them. If you have any questions on the cash balances, as I stated. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So for the bank reconciliation, we got rid of the CD, so that is no longer listed on here. So if you guys notice that, that's a change. We just have our LGIP and the regular claims account. It's broken down into 3 categories here for the job. Well, it used to be the job creation. It's now just kind of an account to have set aside for operations for the upcoming Urban Renewal Agency. Those are funds that are not increment related. And then we've got our other funds that are increment related, divided between other taxing districts as well as current city increment. Any questions on that before I move on to the bond? No? Okay, so then we have our first month of the year for bond. It's just interest allocating now. There's usually no activity on these accounts until bond payments and transfers are made. So we had interest received of $3,995.94 on the remaining funds in those bond accounts. Any questions on that?
Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve the monthly cash reconciliation report?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Warwick, second. Second by Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Very good. Thanks, Rochelle.
Also, just to note, because I didn't put this as an item on the sheet I gave you earlier, it was listed under pending projects, but because that DDA was approved tonight, it will be moving up. I think I probably should have had it in that other category to be approved, but a DDA is similar to a resolution in the sense that we're entering into a contract. So once that is signed, then that will be moving up and reduce your balance to the $3 million.
Okay, this brings us to a couple of items that we moved into the action category from the consent calendar. The first one was to approve an amendment to number 1, to the agreement for professional design services for the civil design of the 7th Avenue Arthur Plaza extension with Keller Associates.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. This was simply an oversight when we had solicited Keller Associates to do our civil design for the plaza expansion. The scope of work that they had sent back included only Arthur Street, and it did not include Seventh Avenue. And we had missed that when we reviewed the document, and so it was approved. Their numbers were based solely on that one portion. And we were very excited at the time because the numbers, the first bid we had ever gotten back, that was lower than we expected. But it turns out there was an error. So the bid, so the quote actually went up 17,000, and so that's where, I think the total now is 37,000 to do the civil design for the entire plaza and not just that one section.
Okay, very
And
good.
so this is just a correction.
The correction with an additional 17,000 though.
Correct.
So the recommended action is to approve the amendment, revising the total, civil design scope of the work for the Seventh and Arthur Street improvements to be performed by Keller and Associates to the total amount of $37,380. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second by, or motion by Ms. Warwick, second by Mr. Moore. Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Warwick?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Porter?
Yes.
Commissioner Doty?
Yes.
Very good. And that takes us to the next item that was moved from the consent calendar, and that's the award of bid and approved contract for the construction of the pressure irrigation system in Lions Park.
Thank you. Lions Park has traditionally been irrigated via flood irrigation, and so it's been extremely difficult for the Parks Department to maintain that park. The way the park is configured is there's actually a parcel in the middle that has a building on it that is owned by a private citizen, and then there's park on both sides. And some discussion that actually came up this morning by the mayor, which I was not aware of, is, let me just back up real quick. The proposal for this design, the proposal of the design is to have construction completed to put a full pressure irrigation system throughout the entire park so that the flood irrigation is no longer needed. The Parks Department feels this is necessary in order to be able to level the grass, and they can make it a more usable area. The information that came up this morning was that apparently the mayor is considering maybe I don't know, not selling off, but I guess maybe getting rid of part of the park, the surplus in the section of the park that's on the west side, which would certainly impact the scope of work. And so my recommendation probably at this point, this is not an urgent item that we have to address. I would probably defer this item until the meeting in December, and hopefully by then we have more direction on whether the city wants to continue with pressure irrigation on the entire park, or if we want to focus on maybe just a portion of the park for future growth.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Very, Mr. Moore?
So, you know, that part, and it might be a conflict, and
Right,
I'm
I was
a
gonna-
30-year member of the coal lines, a 4-time president in terms of this. So, but my concern is, any irrigation on that will always ruin those courts. I don't know why they haven't been rose already.
The basketball courts? Yeah, okay. Well, I think the pressure irrigation should help that significantly. With the flood irrigation, they have to basically flood the entire site, and so you may have a situation like that. I'm not sure why the courts were built the way they were. They seem like they may be a little low. But if you have pressure irrigation, then at least you can control the spray of the sprinklers and keep the water generally off the court. So that may help the situation.
In talking with Stacy, that, you know, we've got a water shortage or a drought, seem like the irrigation, flood irrigation that we have is a better alternative, long-term alternative to the whole thing versus sprinkling system, that I discussed with him. So I just wondered if maybe if those courts were, if that court was raised, just the one court or those courts, whatever, I think that whole thing would be.
And eliminate the need to go to pressure irrigation? Okay. And that may be, I'm not exactly sure, you know, what your discussion was with Stacy. Stacy's the park superintendent. The discussions I've had with him is the flood irrigation is more difficult to maintain, and someone has to go out there and open the valves and do a bunch of that type of work. It doesn't always go where you want it to go, and so, the impression that I had received was that they wanted to move forward, along with Luby Park was the other one, and get a pressure irrigation system in, because that's just more reliable and has better distribution over the field.
I just thought it was gonna flood even with the new irrigation system.
If they, a lot of that depends on the soil types and things like that, but if they're irrigating properly, you shouldn't be getting flooding. They should be able to irrigate without having water running off onto the courts. But the courts are low, and so that may not completely mitigate the problem.
I agree, there's not a priority.
Okay. Right, very good. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Takes us to our attorney report. Mr. Hildy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick. Under Section A, 213 to 217 South Kimball, that is the CRR contractors. The DDA is out. That was completed last week. It's in their hands for review. Same is true. 516 Main is a mono. The DDA is complete in draft form. It's out for the attorney review. Stephen reported on the 510 Arthur Street. I haven't seen the 4 responses, but certainly as an economic team, we'll be digging in on that. I don't have an update for you on Creekside Development. It continues to move forward, and they continue to submit their reimbursement requests. Which brings us to the last item. This is something I reported on first at the last meeting, where we became aware that the county was not accounting for and paying over to the Urban Renewal Agency tax delinquencies in the form of interest and penalties or fees that were charged to the taxpayers. The portion of that would be associated with increment, which is the agency's funding mechanism, as you know, was not being paid to the agency, hasn't been paid to the agency, and they've been retaining that. So it had come to my attention shortly before the last meeting, and I just wanted to let you know I was looking into it. We have done a little bit more digging on that. And, really what I was interested in was to determine whether there was any sort of a basis. It didn't seem logical. What we had heard from the county was, let's take the city of Caldwell, for example, or the school district or any other taxing district. They would accumulate the fees, penalties, and interests and pass those along to the underlying taxing district. But the only one they weren't doing it for was the agency. I wanted to find out before we moved forward whether there was any statutory basis for that. And really the way we asked it was in a twofold approach was, are those monies associated with penalties treated the same under our tax code as the underlying taxes that get paid on properties? And the answer to that's yes. They should be treated the same way. Second question was, is there a basis for not treating the agency the same as a taxing district? And this was something that did come back from the county, that the agency is not a taxing district, and that is true. But there isn't any basis for that. It's not a meaningful difference. The agency is not a taxing district, but it does receive property tax revenue, and there's no reason why this portion of it should stay to fund the county generally rather than be passed along to the agency. So as we ask these questions, we're beginning to narrow in on, a serious concern as to why this is happening. I think I also mentioned this is a dispute that is ongoing between Post Falls and their Urban Renewal Agency and Kootenai County. There's been a couple of explanations offered by Kootenai County as to why they're doing this. One is that they're keeping that money to reimburse the county for the costs associated with collecting those delinquencies. That is inconsistent with the statutes because the county can go ahead and assess those costs over and above the penalties on the delinquencies. They also pointed out that the agency was not a taxing district, but that doesn't seem to be a distinction that has any meaning under the law. So we'll stay in touch with the city of Post Falls, or at least their city attorney, who I think is working with their Urban Renewal Agency as this develops up there. Next steps. My intent now is to simply schedule a meeting with the county attorney and the treasurer and seek an explanation as to how long has this been going on and why, and what are we missing, and why are they treating these funds differently. County's been a great partner with us in lots of areas, and so we want to be a little bit careful as we ask those questions. Careful. be very direct asking questions. What I don't wanna do is shoot off a demand letter or certainly file some kind of lawsuit before we have a chance to hear them out. So, that's the next step. Gonna hear out what they have to say and, consider that and probably report back. But in the next month, in addition to doing that, we'll probably come up with some specific recommendations for what next steps are if we aren't satisfied with the explanations that we receive. So that's the status. We'll continue moving forward on it. Any questions on, any of those items?
Any questions? Mr. Doty?
You may have not taken the step yet, or they may not have told you, maybe they will at the meeting. Do you know how much it would be? Have they come up with a figure?
No, we don't know. I did have Rochelle run some numbers. I think, Rochelle, your spreadsheet went back to the inception of the agency. Was it, how far back did it go? Okay. Do we, and maybe this was on your spreadsheet, I didn't see it. Do we know how long they've been handling the taxes this way?
I would say since 2001, which is when they don't even have ledgers that go back that far.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Okay. There, in addition to how long it's been occurring, there will be presumably some statute limitations issues that we'll have to look at too. So it's a little premature to say how much. Rochelle's number was very large. It was about $750,000. That's not the right number, but it's likely to be significant.
They have been a great partner. They've also been a wonderful beneficiary of urban renewal as well, so.
Correct.
They've,
in more ways than we knew, maybe.
they've had more bites of the apple than, than we were aware of. Takes us to commissioner reports. Thanks, Mark. Ms. Warwick?
Nope.
Mr. Doty?
I'd just like to say I spent a lot of time patrolling that Moscow area, so just my thoughts are with Moscow tonight.
Sure. Of course. Mr. Moore?
I took a trip up north Idaho and talked to quite a few of the towns on the way back, and it's really neat to see how they grow too. Looks like their problems might be a little bit more complex too in some local places, but it's really neat. So neat to see this state come along.
Mm-hmm. I've just got a couple of things real quick. We'd like to read this letter from Joe. Dear Mayor, it is with regret that I tender my resignation from the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency Board effective immediately. My wife and I have been offered a great opportunity out of state for the next year or two, and God willing, it appears to be a perfect fit for the both of us. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to serve on the board of this fine organization for the past several years, and I offer my best wishes for its continued success. We'll miss Joe sitting here with us and thank him for his service. As was mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going to be needing some special meetings coming up. And as of now, we have our regularly scheduled meeting for December 12th, and then we're probably looking at another one on the 19th, the Monday following. So you'll be notified in plenty of time, and we will try to be as efficient with our time as we can. We know it's a busy time of year, and there's a lot going on. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Just one thing.
Mr. Doty?
Did you find out how we go about replacing Joe's position, or do you want to say that?
Mr. Hilty, do you want to give us some walking steps through that? I had an informal talk with the mayor about replacing Joe's position, but we'd like to hear from you as well.
Sure, I haven't, this is the first time hearing of it, so I haven't looked back at the ordinance, or the statute for that matter. Vacancies on the Urban Renewal Agency Board are filled by the city council. And so I'll talk to the mayor about what his process for that might be. You know, if there was a vacancy associated with a city council position, it would be filled by a city council member. This one's obviously not, so it'll be an at-large, selection. I think the only criteria on the statute is that you have to be, a registered, not registered voter, you have to be a qualified elector and reside within a county. And so that's the pool of people that would be eligible. But, let me, if I could ask, is the question about process or timing or both? What's the?
Well, we have a lot of big decisions coming up, and I would like to get it place sooner than later, though I'm not
Okay.
the end-all be-all to that. I don't know what the others think about that, but just what is the process? I think the word is starting to get out, and so people are inquiring as well, and I don't have an answer for them
Okay.
how it works, that's all.
So and in that regard, they need to talk to the mayor, and then he will nominate somebody for confirmation by the city council. So yeah, if you're hearing from people that are interested, or you know somebody that might be a good fit, have them go talk to the mayor.
Thank you.
You bet.
Very good. Now, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All right.